let us take grades of organization and body plan into the consideration, and on basis of that we will come to the next general characteristics, and we will understand that what are the major broad classifications above phylums, rather I would say. How do we understand an organism's body, that is an animal's body? First of all, the Animalia would have the simplest example, that is amoeba, which is put into the protistans, or you can say any sponges, let's take for example. There would be organisms which would be unicellular, but because they have been put into protistans, so we are not considering it. The unicellular level, that is grades of organization, one would be unicellular level, where the entire cell would be working as an organism. That means a single cell is performing all the functions that organism is supposed to do. That is unicellular. We have talked in great lengths about it in the kingdom Protista. What we are going to concentrate over here is what happens to be Animalia is the multicellular organisms. When we talk about multicellular organisms, we are talking about a classification that is termed as metazoa. Okay. Now, when we have a bunch of cells, you know that we have studied or we have understood that there is a level known as tissue level. If the cells are not arranged in a tissue, that means a cell aggregate plan is present. That means we have talked about thallus earlier, thalloid organization, where there was only tissue and organ system was not present. Over here, when we have the cell aggregate plan, that particular class of organisms would be under a greater division known as parazoa. And over here we have sponges which have cell aggregate plan. The body is not differentiated into tissues for working together. And then we have the higher classification, that is eumetazoa. Eu means true metazoa, which will have a higher level of organization. The grade of organization would be higher and it would be tissue level. Okay. So, tissues would be formed, they could be arranged, these tissues could be arranged or organized into organs, or they could be arranged into a higher level, that is known as organ system. So, on basis of that, whether the tissues have been arranged in organ level or they have been arranged in organ system level, we further have classification. One is radiata and other is bilateria. Now, over here you have to pay attention that the grade of organization is somehow pointing towards another classification system, that is another classification feature that I would say is symmetry. Okay. Now, what is radiata, what is bilateria, what is symmetry basically? We are discussing this one, and we have come to this one as well over here in this classification itself. Please pay attention that one by one we have to understand each general feature, and in terms of those general features we have to see that how the phylums are being classified, how the kingdom has been divided. Now, when we were talking about grades of organization, we saw that there would be one unicellular level and other would be multicellular level. Inside the multicellular level, there would be a cellular stage where there would be cell aggregate plan, and that cell aggregate plan will have sponges. In the terms of eumetazoa, we had tissue level. Tissue level could be further in the organ grade or the organ system grade, where many organs work together. If I talk about myself or yourself, you will see that you have an organ system grade where you have, for sensory system, in order to see something, you have an organ which is involved, that is eye. Apart from that, there is an organ known as brain which is involved. Apart from that, there are glands present in the eye which are responsible for making your vision very much clear. So, we have an organ system grade. Otherwise, the lower organisms, they have an organ. The many organs are not arranged into an organ system in order to conduct a function. So, on that basis, we have eumetazoa. But apart from that, we are coming across two terms, that is radiata and bilateria. If you are paying attention to the terms, we have two more terms that we have to derive from over here. That is, radiata is having radial symmetry and bilateria is having bilateral symmetry. Now, over here we are introduced to the term symmetry. That is why I told you that we are referring to this general feature as well. Now, what is radial symmetry? What is bilateral symmetry? On the basis of symmetry also we are able to classify the organisms into different phylums, and the symmetry happens to be, supposedly you are having a spherical ball in your hand. How many mirror images could be formed out of that? The answer would be that they would be infinite. Now why I am saying that? The plant body or the animal body, we do not take plant body. In case of plants we take the flowers. In case of animals we take the entire animal body. How many mirror images could be formed by passing a central axis? If supposedly you have an organism like this, or you have a round organism, you pass a central axis, you cut the organism's body into two parts from the central axis, how many mirror images are being formed? In case you have only one mirror image which is being formed, there is only one axis which could form the mirror images. I hope I am clear. If not, I am repeating it again. Supposedly, you have an organism like this. That is a spherical organism. Imagine it in 3 dimensions. And other organism happens to be like this. Okay. Now, how many axes are present which can divide this organism into two parts in such a way that each part happens to be mirror image? How many axes could pass through the central part of the body so that the parts of the organism which are formed, they are mirror images in case there are more than one? That means almost as many axes you can pass from the central axis, and as many cuts you are making every time. If you are having a mirror image, that would be the radial symmetry. That means the organism would be somewhat spherical in shape. Take the example of a ball, spherical ball. Supposedly you cut it from one axis, central axis. Every time you change the central axis degree, you are going to find the mirror images because it is a sphere. In case of any other organism, any other shape, if it is not spherical, what happens is that there is only one single axis, central axis. If you cut the organism from that, you are going to find the mirror images, and that symmetry is known as bilateral symmetry. Alright, one is radial symmetry, other is bilateral symmetry. Radial symmetry gives you n number of axes where you can get the mirror images, and bilateral symmetry gives you only one axis where you get the mirror images. So this is about the radial and bilateral symmetry. And talking about parazoans, they would be undoubtedly asymmetrical. How can you expect any symmetry in things which are not arranged? So we have 3 types of organisms over here: asymmetrical, radially symmetrical and bilaterally symmetrical. Okay, we were talking about grades of organization. We had come to the organ grade, we had come to the organ system grade. That is the highest system. Okay, next what we are going to study is, we have come across these grades of organization, we have reached the organ system. So we are done with the grades of organization, we are done with the 3 types of symmetries. First one, that was in the case of parazoa, that was totally asymmetrical. Next is that we have radial and bilateral symmetry. Now we are going to talk about germ layers, body cavity. Body plan has also been discussed, because we have discussed that whether the organism is radial or it is having a different shape, and whether it is having the cell aggregate plan or it is having a tissue level. So next we are going to study about these 2. We have studied about these 3 individually. Next we have to understand, once these parts are clear, what about these 2? And nutrition, I guess you know very well, but before that we have to do these.